you very much, and a very warm welcome to the inaugural SpeakIn webinar on auto retail. My name is Deepshikha and I represent SpeakIn. We are very thankful to our wonderful speakers and the fantastic audiences for the evening to have joined us all. Let me start by welcoming Mohit Arora. Mohit is currently a partner at Montreal in Singapore. With roots in Tata Motors, Mohit is the former head of India and APAC operations at JD Power. While dealerships rarely fell in love with JD Power, Mohit himself has become one of the most admired, acknowledged, and respected thought leaders for the Indian automotive industry with his high-value, actionable insights. Thank you very much, Mohit, for joining us today and structuring today's discussion as the moderator. Then I welcome Mr. John K. Paul, last serving president of the Federation of Automotive Dealers Association. Mr. Paul has been at the helm of one of the largest automotive dealer groups in India, Popular Motors. A former president at TAI Kerala, Mr. Paul stands apart with his progressive business leadership and has set an example of the massive scale a professionally run automotive business can reach. A very warm welcome, Mr. Paul. I now welcome Mr. Sharvik Shah. From commercial vehicles with Ashok Leyland to passenger vehicles with Toyota. Under his leadership, Rajesh Motors, one of the biggest automotive dealer groups in Western India, has seen exponential growth. An avid entrepreneur, Sharvik makes 360-degree contributions as a businessman across forums like Entrepreneurs Organization, CII, TAI, and many more. Welcome, Sharvik. Welcoming now Mr. Nikun Sanghi. It is often said, the axis of the Indian automotive industry is where Mr. Nikun Sanghi stands. Mr. Sanghi's thought leadership spans across OEMs, dealerships, and components alike. He has been also an active contributor to global forums representing India and currently heads the Automotive Skill Development Council of India as its chairman. Welcome, Nikunji. Now, it is my utmost privilege to introduce an Indian automotive industry legend, Mr. Jagdish Khattar, a businessman, an author, an entrepreneur, a former IAS officer, and the former MD of Maruti Suzuki India. Mr. Khattar has been credited with his exemplary contributions to the early wins and a rock-solid foundation for the Indian automotive industry in its formative years. It is once again an honor to have you with us on this panel, sir. With that, I welcome all our panelists and invite Mohit to start today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deepshikha. And I think I look forward to having an interesting discussion with each and every one of you. I think these are very uncertain and challenging times as we look at it. And I think the topic that was chosen for the discussion today, braving the new reality of automotive retail, is it could not be more apt. When I started thinking about this topic, I think looking at what's been happening around us, there were so many questions that are being raised, were being raised in terms of what's happening to us, what's happening to this world. I just looked at the picture today, and frankly speaking, when you look at the scenario, the world's painted in red. I mean, at this point of time, as of today, you're looking at over 2.6 million cases, according to the Johns Hopkins University. Across the world, most of the countries, what you see in red, countries are shut. Okay, I mean, there's no business happening. It's been the case for weeks now, and these lockdowns are extending. When we come to India itself, you're clearly looking at the average number of cases, or the actual number of cases per day, actually rising by every passing day. In a situation where the balance is trying to be struck between lives and livelihood, we are trying to understand where is automotive retail headed, with so many questions in mind, looking at the challenges that we look at the automotive dealer or the automotive network, even the operations at the retail operations at OEMs. We are looking at multiple questions going up in the air. It could be in terms of revenues. In terms of revenues, where are my revenues? How do I manage my cash flows? Operations, looking at how do I manage my rising costs? And the cost is going to go up further. Employees, are they a cost at this point of time, or are they an asset? customers, we have always talked about, and I think we have somebody on the panel today who talks about Atiti Devo Bhava. I remember that ad that Maruti ran many, many years ago. Customers were likened to gods and kings, but given today's reality, probably gods and kings will be easier to please than the customer that we have, than the elusive customer that we have, on our doorsteps. Regulations, are they an enabler or are they an impediment? So I think looking at many of these situations that face each and every one of us who is on this panel, because all of us somewhere are running a business, all of us somewhere are part of an industry. I think what we are looking at in clear and pretty uncertain terms is that we are all staring at abyss. I mean, staring at something where we are clearly not sure what is the way forward. There is a huge amount of uncertainty that lies in front of us. Charting our way, navigating our way through this journey is the reason why we have gathered together. So basically, I think in terms of the agenda that we have in front of us, we will be focusing on a couple of things out here. First of all, to start with, since we have a lot of dealer partners here, looking at, what is the impact on the retail network. And we will look at all we will try and cover as much as we can in terms of the operations. Looking at, what is the likely behavior of the customer and how that would change with this changed reality. Looking at, how to navigate this future. While a lot has been talked about some of these challenges, I think I would like to probably spend a good point of time with the panelists to understanding how we can really navigate the future that is likely to be in front of us. What lessons can we learn from history and what is the best way forward? So with that, I would like to start off the discussion, and probably I would start with John, coming from the southernmost part of the country. You are one of the biggest dealers for Maruti. I know that you represent many, many other brands. Starting with your perspective, how do you see business in the weeks and months to come?
Hi Mohit. Hi, Mr. Cutter. This is John here. Okay.
Right.
So what I see is in the immediate future, in the next 2-3 months at least, things are not going to be very good, because even now, even after the opening up, I don't think anybody is very clear on how you can open up. Of course, there's again this Damocles sword hanging over your head. You don't know when this could erupt again. So leaving the first, say, 4 to 6 months, or at least 4 months, where I don't see we can do much. But beyond that, again, I see that most customers or most people would not prefer to travel too much in public transport, including the Ubers and Olas. So what could happen is, I'm sure there would be an inclination for most customers to move towards their private transport in whatever way they can afford. And for reviving the market, if the government could bring down the price by bringing down GST to 18% flat, I'm quite sure that there would be an impetus, and this could lead to a regeneration in the economy, okay, a rebound in the economy. That's how I see it immediately, Mohit.
Great. I think, coming to your dealerships, I know that you have multiple outlets, you have, different brands that are with you. Do you see, looking at the realities for the different brands at this point of time in India, the reality will be different, and how would it be different?
Okay, what I would say is, since, the automotive trade, automotive retail, we need continuous employment. Okay, retention for us is a very, very serious factor. Unlike say agriculture or real estate, where though they are larger employers, they are seasonal or even project based. But the automobile retail sector, unless you can retain your people, you cannot go forward. Here, I see a big challenge, because unless, see the volumes for, as I said, for the next 4 to 6 months may be a challenge. And if that remains, then our costs are going to be very, very high. So we need to find out how we can reduce costs. Just getting people out or not, letting go of people I don't think is much of an option. Then there are rental and interest, which are the next higher costs. Again, we'll have to work out how to bring that down. Maybe the margins should be increased, at least for the lower volumes. I'm sure the OEMs will study that and come out with better margins. Otherwise, we are going to face problems. Okay. And so the next thing that I would like to say on that is, how do we, the customers, as you said earlier, may not want to come to the showroom or may not even want to meet our salespeople. So how do we do things? We will have to do it on digital. We are reaching across to them, keeping in touch with them on a continuous basis, renewing their insurance and whatever else that they want. We should be able to do it online and bring down the costs. That should be a major cost reduction. And I think we are all working on that. We have, as a dealership, we have already started taking that very, very seriously. We are training our people to do digital and to be in touch even in these closed lockdown days. I think that's the future, bringing down costs and yet reaching out much more than what we have been doing today.
Great. So I think I will move on that point to Nikunj. I mean, Nikunj, I know that we were talking in the afternoon and looking at, the fact that you are, up near the center, you have multiple dealerships, both for, passenger vehicles as well as for two-wheelers. Do you see the reality any differently from what John just talked about, and especially when it comes to dealer operations? How do you see the way forward for sales operations versus service operations? How would these operations be conducted differently from the way things were happening in the past?
So I think while I agree with whatever John said, and there could be no difference of opinion, because what he said was absolutely right in terms of our cost going up and the business model being extremely brittle and fragile, and can't see how this business model can sustain if disruptions of 3-4 weeks cannot be taken care of. Then obviously we are not standing on very firm ground. But how things will change is primarily because while the lockdown might get removed, but the coronavirus is not going anywhere for the next 18 or 24 months, because that's the amount of time it'll take to develop vaccines and then to vaccinate everybody. And India is a huge population. So I think the way we do business is going to change, with social distancing becoming so important. I guess customers walking in for service or walking in for inquiries is obviously a complete no-no. I think everything will happen by prior appointment so that we can control the number of people who are coming in, and we can limit the number of people who are coming in, and we can exercise all precaution that is required for the safety of our own teams and more the safety of our customers. Because I think more than anything else, the primary concern that's going to remain for the next 18 to 24 months is safety and life of people. So while there is jaan hai to jahan hai and jaan hai to jahan bhi hai, so that dialogue keeps changing, but I think life is important and we will need to look after that. So the entire paradigm of productivity efficiency will change. And because of that paradigm changing, I think it's going to put a huge cost to how we entertain people, in terms of the cost of sanitizing them and cost of ensuring that our premises are sanitized, and the way we give test drives, the way we handle vehicles, the way we take in vehicles, the way we give back vehicles. I think everything is going to change, and I think more and more business will be done digitally than physically. So I think the customer will walk in only to take delivery of the vehicle. Everything else will have to happen digitally. Similarly, I think There'll be more pick-up and drop services where the customer will not be encouraged to visit dealerships, and we will have our people collecting vehicles and delivering them back with an online access to our entire infrastructure, so the customer can be a part of the infrastructure while physically not being there, being absolutely sure and that the way we are handling his vehicle. So I think a lot of more transparency will need to come into our operations. We will need to enable our teams digitally far more than what they are now, use very many more digital tools than what we are using today, and obviously upskill and reskill our entire team to get used to this new norm, this new environment where you meet people virtually, where you do everything virtually, and you have minimal chance of being in physical touch. So I think the sizes of infrastructure, the kind of inventories that we hold, I think all that will need to change, and change drastically. I think we will have to come out of the present system of doing business.
So, Nikunj, talk to me a little bit more, because I think these are real, genuine issues which I think every dealership is facing. So, I mean, talk to me about how JS4 Wheels is trying to go around mitigating some of these. What strategies are you deploying at a dealership level, and where exactly are things that you could share in terms of your thought process across either one of your dealerships that you see for trying to mitigate some of the challenges that you'd mentioned about cost, about people, customer issues. You talked about employee. You talked about skills. So I think if you could kind of, for the the attendees, share some of the things that you have been doing at your dealership, that will be extremely insightful.
So I think what we've done in the last 4 weeks is that a lot of digital tools we thought were not so important for employees, while they were important for us. Something as simple as a Twitter handle. I think in the last 4 weeks, we have almost mandated that each of our employees is on Twitter. Each of our employees are specifically following things like the page of the manufacturer, the customer care pages, the Twitter handles of the customer care departments, because I think those are areas where customers are now getting extremely active, and they find it the best way of communication. So unless our people are live there, our people know how to handle those, our people get connected to the customer even before a small issue can explode into a major issue. So we are making them aware of Instagram, of Facebook, of the Twitter handle, of LinkedIn, because we don't know which platform the customer will use, which platform he will come on. And we will need to get back to the customer at the fastest possible, whether it's a sales inquiry, a service inquiry, a sales concern, or a service concern. I think unless each of our employees, now you can't have a dedicated digital team. I think your entire dealership needs to be focused on digital, need to be empowered to be digital, need to be skilled to be digital. So I think that's one thing that we have trying to do in the last 4 weeks, and I'm glad that almost 100 of my employees in the last 2 weeks have come on to Twitter. We are trying to tell them what are the kind of pages they need to follow. They've come on LinkedIn, they've come on Facebook. The other thing that we are doing is that fortunately in the entire ecosystem, a lot of digital skilling is taking place. For example, Automotive Skill Development Council has started an online sales executive digital course, which normally is chargeable. It is hosted by TCS Eon, curated by them, and a wonderful course, which we have made it free for all dealerships. So that this is the time when they can engage, keep their employees engaged, skill them into new ways of engaging with the customer. And they not only get trained, but they also get certified. So I think these are the kind of initiatives that as dealers, we will need to see that how when the lockdown opens, we are probably not as well prepared as we should be, but we are much better prepared pre-lockdown and post-lockdown. There is a huge difference which comes in the way the people are aware that this is the way we will need to A lot of people will need to probably start working from home and not come to the dealerships at all. Right. The entire team, which is into customer follow-up, insurance follow-up, inquiry follow-up, they need not come to the dealership. They can keep working from home, because coming and going to the dealership itself is going to be very risky. Yeah. So how we can empower them to work, and therefore also keep a track of cyber security, because that's becoming a huge concern. So I think these are the things that we will need to enable and do differently. And these are some of the immediate thoughts which come to me, but I'm sure there is a lot more that is going to happen as we go forward.
So coming to another aspect where I think, because you have also been the president for ASDC, as well as, you are very closely, in the activities of FADA. How do you see the current regulation? I mean, is it an enabler today for business? Is it an impediment? John talked about GST elements. I know that earlier. I mean, what is it that we need to, the government needs to, be cognizant of in terms of looking at changes which are not a cash incentive directly, but probably will enable business in this new reality?
So I think the first thing that the government needs to realize is that the Inspector Raj doesn't come back. The controls don't come back. And you don't scare businessmen. You need to encourage them. They are wealth creators. They are the people who are giving employment. Unfortunately, the atmosphere that is getting created is that we are there, we'll catch you, commit a mistake, and we'll be there. So that's not an enabler at all. Now, even a partial lifting of the lockdown, I think the first message that you get from the Ministry of Home Affairs is that one positive case and we'll lock down your business for the next 3 months, and we'll file criminal cases against all the directors and owners of the business. Now, something which the government can't control, we can take all precautions. We can do everything which is humanly possible to see that we do not become the source of spreading the coronavirus. But one single case detected and your business gets locked down, why open the business at all? So these are definitely not enablers. There is too much control. There is too much emphasis on compliance. And there is a huge cost involved in compliance. There is a huge delay in this compliance. The entire flexibility is lost. I think these controls, the Inspector Raj should not come back. It's with great difficulty that India got rid of the Inspector Raj. But it seems to be coming back, and coming back in a very, very big way.
Moving, I think, Shavik, coming to you, what Nikunj is saying is very interesting. I mean, look, in terms of regulation, in terms of cost of business, looking at challenges from a customer perspective, how do you see business? How do you see the new normal for your dealerships? You are a part, I know that you have a large footprint in Rajasthan, and you cut across not just passenger cars, but you have a lot of frontage in commercial vehicles and commercial machinery. So how do you see business the new avatar of business for yourself and for your dealerships when you look at these challenges that both Nikunj and John talked about?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think already Mr. John and Nikunj have already covered a lot of things that we are going to be facing at the dealerships, and I will completely agree in terms of the new normal that is going to happen. So just adding to what they have been saying is the whole process has to change the way we are doing business. I would agree in terms of how we optimize our teams. I agree that we need to retain our teams because they are our largest assets. At the same time, we also, we've always worked towards how we are able to retain our teams, how we are able to take care of them. But in these times also, we need to see how we keep them engaged and they understand where the company is and how we need to go ahead with that. And I think if we are able to do that and we are able to work along with them, that is one aspect of that. On the other side, as Mr. Sanghi also said, that we need to flatten our organization. There are so many hierarchies, how we can flatten it and, improve our reach with the existing team. Right. At the same time, a lot of changes in terms of SOPs is going to happen. We'll have to draft new SOPs. We'll have to draft new processes, considering the new challenges and the new norms that are going to be. So while we are doing these activities, we are also trying to see how we can improve and change the processes to understand the new norms. Today, whatever we predict, these are uncertain times. Whatever we plan today might not be executable tomorrow. I'm saying how this pandemic goes in, I'm saying 12 months, 18 months, this is unknown. And as rightly said, there is always going to be a fear that in case somebody who's affected comes into our dealership and affects us, and what would happen to the team, what would happen to the people around us. So yes, pickup and drops, then getting customers engaged through digital methods and connecting with them, seeing that how we are able to deliver the new cars at their residences with proper care. Going a lot of our finances actually at Toyota Finance has gone digital. They are trying to clear documentation digitally so that only at the time of delivery they need to go and sign some documents. So number of contacts with the customers go down.
Right.
Now, while all this is happening, if I look at the commercial vehicle end also,
right,
I think this is a time where we can reach out to a customer. Most of our customers would have their own setups. So instead of calling them to our workshops and, if you can go out, reach out to them at their setups and probably give them service at their doorsteps is something that we are also trying to look into. We're also trying to see how we can spread our parts distribution network and see how commercial vehicle, our parts are reached at the doorsteps. What we have been seeing is commercial vehicles specifically has been running. I'm saying even during the lockdown periods, things started moving, though a lot of it was locked. In the last couple of weeks, people have started moving out, and especially after 20th, a lot of transporters have started moving their vehicles and got their drivers on board. And slowly it's trickling, and we are seeing that a lot of vehicles are coming to our workshop also for service. We have a lean team of around 4 to 5 people at almost 8 to 9 workshops that we have active right now in Rajasthan and across various locations in the state. And we are seeing around 4 to 5 vehicles coming on a daily basis. But this will limp back. I'm saying when will this be full capacity? We don't know. We have created SOPs to see that these vehicles are sanitized and got into the vehicle, but got into our workshops. But nevertheless, I agree. There is going to be uncertain times in terms of how we will come back to our revenues, how we will be able to get into maximizing or at least going to the level where we were. Commercial vehicles specifically have been in a bad time. We are totally into BS6 now. So BS4, BS6 transition has just happened. Most of us are having zero stocks. So at least on that front, we are okay. But with the new BS6 vehicles, the product has to be proven to the customers. They have to understand. So I think retails is not going to happen for the next 3-4 months. So that's going to be a challenging time, at least in commercial vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think one of the big questions, Sharvik, is basically how do we conserve cash in the current operations? In terms of looking at business continuity, I think one of the top things being discussed is when the revenues are, kind of not there, just not present, but the costs are there. How do we look at conserving cash? I mean, are there any strategies that your dealership has deployed in terms of looking at ways to conserve cash to survive this current crisis?
So in commercial vehicles, it's mostly B2B business, and most of our customers are with us on some credit lines that they've drawn with us. With the current situation, not have they had any revenues, not have we. But at the same time, we need to get the wheel rolling. So what we are looking at, we are working with some banks and finance companies for bill discounting. So based on their understanding, we will work with them and sign up an agreement so that we are able to discount their bills on a 30 days or a 45-day cycle. And the banker pays us immediately. And they recover the money within that 30-45 days from the customer. So we are almost finalizing that draft, and probably once we open in full swing, probably the 3rd or 4th, I think we will have that in place. Secondly, we are also trying to look up into a way we can, renegotiate our rentals in terms of, in many, this is done by a lot of retail retailers in malls where, you come in with a fractional, profit sharing mode. So we're looking at how we can draft that with our landlords and work out on a model like that on the rentals.
Okay, interesting. So I think looking at the picture here, coming to you, Mr. Khattar, I think what we are hearing currently is while, what Sharvik said, Nikunj also said it, and so did John, looking at, ways of managing in the current reality, everybody is trying to, find some way of managing the challenges that are upon us. I know that you yourself have lived through a lot of these challenges in the past, whether be it as an IS officer, whether be it the fact that, navigating a company like Maruti, the size of that company during those during the era of liberalization, where again there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the business. Challenges both internally and externally. Looking at your own business that you have, floated in the past. Looking at this, what is it that you would like to share that dealerships need to definitely look at in terms of managing the challenges that are now thrown upon us with this current crisis?
I wish I had a clear answer to your question, because there are too many variables today.
Right.
And I joined automobile industry in early 90s, and what we learned then and what one did during my association with Maruti, I don't think much of it is relevant today. That is very important. That our past experience, yes, we should keep that in mind, but it may not be replicated. So what we are going to see now and what we are seeing now is what we have not seen so far. So I'm not pessimistic, but I feel that there is uncertainty and we need to navigate ourselves, and the dealerships have to be very cautious as far as their cost and others are concerned, because I think some of them had gone overboard with their investments. To a large extent, I think the OEMs are responsible. We in Maruti were very cautious that the dealers should not overspend, because it's easy to spend when you are earning money. But when you are not, then it becomes difficult. Okay, having said that, India is a very peculiar market. Two players control 65 to 70% of the market.
Right.
I mean, where else in the world do you have a thing like this? And you got another 15, 18 players. They are all with a market share of less than 10%. Even most of them are less than 5%. What is their future like? Will this upheaval that we are seeing today, will it change the customer mindset about which manufacturer to support? You can have a lot of enthusiasm, naya model aaya hai, naya manufacturer hai, and then sometimes you start thinking safety and all that. So that is one point. I think it did not come up in a big way, but it will come up in some way or the other as far as the future is concerned, and how the customers are going to face this question. Third is, the whole scene is changing as far as automobiles is concerned. There was a talk earlier, do we need the offices that we have today, all people working? I read a paper which has said that going forward, most of the companies need to have an office space only for 30% of their employees. Rest 60, 65, 70% can work from their homes, and they can keep coming by rotation to always once a week. If the companies decide that they have to cut down cost, and go forward with this plan. I mean, it may undergo changes, upar niche ho jayega, but the thinking is there and possibility is there. Now, if this conversion takes place and people start working from home in large number,
right.
I mean, what happens to our whole network? Will people shift from cars to motorbikes or bicycles?
Mm-hmm.
Families which are having 3 cars, 4 cars, if they reduce it by 1 or 2, which changes will take place. So the point I'm really making is that I think the industry and all players in the industry, whether the dealers, vendors, manufacturers, need to sit down together and work out and see what is the way forward. How can they move forward and all of them surviving, properly. And in the meanwhile, if there are areas where they can cut down costs, with this automation coming place and all other things places, I think the whole re-engineering of the industry is required. I mean, let me put it, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but what I'm saying is what was relevant till 2 years back, or what was relevant even till 6 months back, may not be relevant today. Because there was a talk earlier that, the companies like Ola and all will be taking over most of the business and the individuals will reduce. But that is now becoming, again, difficult because of the new threat that is coming in. So the situation is very fluid. Of course, there will be a need. The need will vary, whether the need will be for very expensive cars or ones which, do the work, the customer perceptions about it, the health part of it. You have now motorbikes, you have bicycles with motors.
Right.
Now, if people are going to work from home, do they need a car? No, they need a bicycle with the motor and not. So what I'm saying is this is going to be a flux and it will take some time. Meanwhile, the industry should be confident that they have a role to play going forward, but the role may be different, the needs may be different, the approach may be different. They need to study that and trim accordingly. Trial and error will take place, but the direction has to be undertaken. And I'm sure that at the end of it, all will be winners, but it will mean some hard work and toil.
I think that's great words of wisdom, Mr. Khattar. I remember in my past association with you, you have been a big champion of, focus on the customer, looking at, the uncertainty and the changes and the challenges that Maruti faced at that point of time, where market shares were under pressure, new players were coming in, new models were coming in, the customers were getting tempted. I think one of the core premises that you defined internally was, how do you stay rooted to what the customer truly wants? So how do you, look at this current environment and what would your advice be to dealerships who would be servicing very varied catchment areas? And the variance is not just coming from the traditional parameters that we all know about, but also the fact that some places you may just not be able to do any business because those places are red zones, whereas there are other areas which are open for business. How does a dealership navigate, develop an understanding, and move to take advantage of the opportunities that may come in front of them?
Well, I think you put a very, very difficult question. But one thing I would really plead with everyone, that is the dealerships, the manufacturers, and the vendors and all, they need to sit down together and work together. Because the challenges that will come will not be relevant to one of them. One of these principles will be for all three. And they should help each other in doing it. Because it is, I say, listen, yaar, if there are two players with nearly 70% market share, or 65 to 70% market share, and the other 18 are in 2s and 3s, what advice can you give to the dealership with 2 or 3% market share? How will they compete? And the customers will get worried a little bit that wo company rahegi, nahi rahegi. I mean, all sorts of stories will come. So coming back, I think it's very important that the new technology, the need of the customers changing. I'm telling you that there was a study made recently, till some time back, the car was number 2 priority after a house for a person to obtain.
Right.
Now it is 6th or 7th. That's huge. I have a nephew. He refuses to buy a car. He says, I don't need it. He's 23, 24.
Right.
He says, why do I need it? The traffic jams and all. So what I'm saying is the culture is changing. These things are changing. The new business models will emerge. We need to be alive for that. We need to trim our sails according to that. You're asking me to give answers. What I'm saying is I'm raising questions. I'm raising questions in the hope that we will start addressing them and sit down together and find an answer to it. And when I say that the study shows that only 30% of the people who are working in offices need to be in office. 60-70% can work at home. I mean, it will be a revolution here. 70% people working from home. They don't need scooter, they don't need cars, they don't need this. What happens? I mean, the roads will, I don't know. So the point I'm making is one should not be disheartened, but one should be aware. And today you cannot tinker with what you were doing earlier. You have to think for fresh. Sometimes when you say you start with a clean sheet of paper, we need to start doing with that and all sit down together. And I would suggest, you have these 4, 5, 6 weeks. In the industry, the dealers, the vendors, the OEMs should make groups and study these issues. And then come out with options. Let there be a debate. I don't think there is an answer to it, but let there be debate and see that what are the possibilities.
Great. Well, I think panelists, it has been a very interesting session. And as I see out here, I have a huge list of questions from the participants. So I think I would start asking each and every one. There are some which are very directed questions. I think maybe first one, Sharvik, looking at it, what will be the impact on workshop business in commercial vehicle dealers? How will vehicle inflow, service revenue, etc. change with the new reality? Sharvik, would you like to take that? I don't know who has asked that because it says Dell out here. So, but maybe Sharvik, maybe you can answer that one.
Yeah, I think workshop revenues will limp back to normal in probably a couple of months, because eventually for the economy to bounce back, goods have to be moved. And we've already seen that a lot of trucks have started moving. I answered that earlier also. So I think commercial vehicles, things would come back because those are essential services that they need to carry out. Economy has to get back into normal mode. So we see at least by a couple of 40-45 days, things should get normal.
Okay. So, but in terms of a service revenue as a service business, service as a business for commercial vehicle industry and even beyond commercial vehicle for passenger cars, is that something which is, you feel that would be one of the strategies going forward for, immediate cash flow for the dealerships?
Yes, I think other panelists would also agree that the industry has been working to focus on service revenues for sustainable dealership operations. I mean, say we are talking about service absorption ratios across. So I think that is going to be the key for sustaining our dealerships. And that is the focus area that one should have.
Okay, great. There is a second question which is coming in from Piyush Karnwal. And the question basically is, what is the panel's suggestion to get customers to showrooms or getting inquiries, as most of the people won't be eager to spend unless it is very important? I don't know. John, would you like to take that?
Okay, I can do that. See, I think all of us already have a number of customers and we have been contacting them. And we can use a number of digital methods. And when I say digital methods, we all have data with us. I think we start contacting customers. Many of our people can sit in the office or sit at home and start contacting customers. So whatever, I mean, it can be service, it can be for the insurance renewal, and it could, lead to a new customers. In the sense, they could change, they could go for used cars, or they could recommend somebody else who would like to have a car. But I think everybody today is of the view that we shouldn't model out. So I think people will start coming out and say, okay, I want a car, but no, come here, just tell me. So then we have to start using better methods to show the car otherwise, or probably the test drive should be the last thing that we do. But, and if it is okay with them, because otherwise a new car doesn't need too much of description. If he can go to the closest showroom. So I think most part of the sales should be done online, and it should be just the last moment when you go offline. I mean, in the sense, physically go take the car to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because frankly speaking, just to add to that, what you are looking at currently is dealerships around the world actually, completely, I mean, it was already happening, but I think it will get accelerated now with the current reality. You would likely see the entire, the different steps during the sales process now getting, moving seamlessly between an offline and an online experience, as we call it, looking at, what is it that OEMs would need, and even dealerships would need to do to enable that. Because many times what we find is that the gap between offline and online is that the handshakes or the handoffs are not very smooth. In terms of your dealerships, John, how would you look at ensuring that the offline and online experience is seamless for your customers?
See, I would just like to add a point over here, Mohit. We've been the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years, I've been continuously going to NADA. That's the American equivalent of FADA.
Right.
And we have been going for their show every year.
Right. Right.
And we've been noticing that they are actually around 5 to 7 years ahead of us in all this. Right. Okay, much of that, or at least part of that, what we could do, we have already started introducing in our own dealerships. And I think even now, in the past few weeks, we have been training our people on Zoom, and we have also been trying to get to our customers, trying to renew the insurance and all those things. So I think there's a lot you can do. It depends on how you get to the customer. You got to train the customer also how to use various applications. Okay?
Right.
If you could do that, the faster you could do that, the faster you can grow your business.
Okay, great. Nikunj, there is a specific question for you from Mr. Ashish Pandey. And basically the question is, given the fact that you talked about increasing cost, shouldn't OEMs increase margins on vehicles to 10% on the minimum? And, clearly, I mean, I'll come to the second part because that is also being asked by several panelists in terms of stocking norms. Should they be revisited? Is there any discussion that you have had with your principals, or there is a central discussion from FADA in terms of looking at the stocking norms? So two parts of the question. First is in terms of vehicle margins, and the second in terms of stocking norms.
I think the first part, the SIAM president, the FADA president has already taken care of. We have sent a letter to the SIAM president, and not just to the SIAM president, to all the EC members, and which means the CEOs of each and every OEM in India to reconsider the business model and definitely increase dealer margins to at least 7% of the selling price, which includes GST. A lot of people are already giving 7%, but that is excluding GST, so which actually means it's only about 4.5%, 5%. So we are talking of a minimum 7% dealer margin on the selling price, excluding any consumer schemes, because most of the time the dealers have to participate in the consumer scheme. So excluding the consumer schemes, this is clear 7% retained margin to dealerships on selling price that we have talked about. So when we wrote this letter, it sounded out of the hat, but apparently it is not only being reasonable, I think it's being a little conservative, asking for only 7%. Right. The second part of the question, which has to do with inventories, I think yes, it needs to be revisited, or I don't know whether I would call it revisited. I mean, it's almost now mandated. And
Right.
I wonder if OEMs will even venture thinking of having the kind of inventories that they've had pre-COVID. Because like I said, that we have an 85% fixed cost, out of which almost 35% of it is only interest cost on inventories. And there is no way we'll be able to sustain this kind of inventory cost. So I think we'll have to talk of almost just-in-time inventories that you have in plants. Right. And with the kind of logistics and the kind of information technology which is now available, right, why should there be inventory at all, either at the manufacturer's end or at the dealer end at all? I mean, in spite of large inventories in the US, customers still wait for the vehicle. They order their vehicle and wait for the vehicle. And I think it's a huge investment that the customer is making, and he will definitely wait for it if that becomes the norm. The problem is that we are fighting each other. We are going over each other, and it's like a battle of blood, and I think we need to get out of it. And Khattar sir very rightly said, we need to collaborate. We need to collaborate, and we cannot have the kind of competitive environment where we are killing each other. Right. I think we need to collaborate. So I think there has to be a common minimum program.
Yeah, so I will come to Mr. Khattar on this one also. Looking at the current situation that we are looking, where OEMs are faced with severe pressure on their bottom lines, on their margins, and the long-standing, penchant for market share. Both these things, whether it is in terms of margins, dealer margins, or in terms of stocking norms, prove to be kind of conflicting where from the perspective of OEMs. I mean, what advice would you like to say? I mean, I agree that what Nikunj said, that there needs to be a common discussion, but how would you like to advise as the way forward?
Listen, in case I sounded pessimistic, I'm not pessimistic. Okay. What I said earlier, but what I meant was times are changing, the equations are changing, and we need to be alive to that and trim ourselves accordingly. Now, so we have, automobile has a good future in India, but we need to change because of all the things that are taking place. Coming back to your answer, to answer your question, listen, there is no way you can reduce your inventory as far as the customer's choice is concerned. That has to be worked out, because if your factories are in here and the supplies take time, you lose your customers. So we have to work out some way by which the time can be reduced and how it can improve. But customer will require, though there is another saying that touch and feel and all, as things go along, it will get reduced and it may not be necessary to that extent. So, I mean, answering your question, we should first reduce our cost as far as our operations are concerned. We should improve, the rents and rates are so high. If we need to trim those facilities, let us do it. Those fixed costs have to be reduced, but don't reduce your cost which really fulfill the need of the customer. I have always believed that don't be stingy, whereas as far as where the customer is concerned, stingy where internally we can do that. So answering your question is that we reduce our cost as far as location is concerned, fixed are concerned, or other things are concerned. But customers' need has to be met. But gradually, customer will also become more savvy, and all that are taking place.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming to a very important point here, you talked about cost, and one of the biggest costs for dealerships tends to be the infrastructure cost. So, internationally, multi-brand outlets is something which is, very much there. And again, this is a question coming in from two of the panelists out here, two of the, audiences out here, Mr. Ashok Patel, as well as, I think, Devendra Patni, basically looking at, what is the future for multi-brand outlets, and is that a way to, save jobs going forward for the dealership?
Can I make a suggestion here?
Yeah.
You see, as I said earlier, India is a very peculiar market where the top two manufacturers have nearly 65 to 70% market share.
Right.
What you're suggesting, if other manufacturers keep fighting alone, they will have a problem. Right. What I would suggest is, why don't they get together in groups? Right. Let them get together in groups, 2 or 3 manufacturers. You can have a look at it, that what is their product line, what is my product line, etc., etc. See that there is a minimum overlap and you provide that. That is one way of cutting down the cost and meeting this. After all, there are countries in Middle East and other where there are multi-brand outlets. Right. Okay, if there are 2, 3 big manufacturers who have independent outlets, let the smaller ones get together into it. Let there be an experiment in this and see how it works out. So that is one way of really dealing with it. Otherwise, if everyone stands alone, in the sense fight their battle, many will find it very difficult to survive.
Yeah, great. Coming to another aspect of dealership operations comes to used vehicle, looking at how, and frankly speaking, if you look at internationally, used vehicle business comes out faster, especially when you are looking at, coming out of a down cycle as compared to the new vehicle sales. Looking at the business, I think Sharvik, probably we talked about it briefly earlier, and I think there are some panelists who are talking about it here, some of the audiences who are talking about here. Looking at used car business or used vehicle business, I would say, would that be something that would come more acutely into focus going forward?
Yes, Mohit, I would agree with you on that, because we feel that is something that will probably trigger faster, and we'll have instead of the new vehicles, used vehicles going up soon. So with our U-Trust operations in Toyota and with our operations in Ashok Leyland, what we have done is we have asked our team members who are already engaging with our customers regularly to connect with them and talk to them not only about new vehicles, also look at how we can help them in their older vehicles, especially in commercial vehicles. With this period, we feel there will be a lot of repossessed vehicles that will be there with the financiers. So we are trying to open a dialogue with our financiers, saying that in case there is something, how we can look at that. So even today, when we talk to our customers, we don't only talk about new vehicles, we ask them if they would be interested in older vehicles, so we can help them in servicing with that. And at the same time, we are also aligning our service team to see how we can refurbish them and give them with some uptime guarantees and give it to them.
Okay, there's a follow-up question for you in terms of looking at the bill discounting that you talked about from Neoshi. The question basically is, could you give some more details regarding the same? I mean, how is it being done and what exactly are you doing?
So basically, we would be making a master agreement with our customers, and eventually, once we supply the material, so on the basis of invoices, the finance will pay us. So that's a normal practice. It's something like bill of exchange or hundi, as we call it in local parlance. So I think that's the normal standard way of doing it.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think so. There is some SOPs that we are creating, and I'm sure we tried it with a couple of customers. I think with we have right now signing it off with almost 300 of our customers.
Right. I think another question which is coming up here, and this is from a couple of audiences. Nix Agarwal is asking that what would be the strategies recommended for two-wheeler dealerships? Would they be any way different from passenger cars? How would they be different, both from a focus towards fixed ops, versus the sales business? What is it that a two-wheeler dealership needs to be more mindful of going forward? Nikunj, I think you have a big two-wheeler dealership.
I think the first thing that I need to come back again and again to the inventories. I think two-wheelers, this is an endemic problem in all two-wheeler brands, that inventories are huge. I mean, in spite of what Mr. Khattar said, we have inventories of 60 days, 90 days, and at times even more. So I think that's one thing that will definitely need to cut down. Two, I think two-wheeler business is slowly shifting to a distribution model, and not so much a retail model, because we now have almost 50 to 60% of our sale coming through what we call authorized representative of dealers or sub-dealers or whatever, or in some markets, they are even brokers.
Right.
So I think we will need to switch over to a model where their investment needs to come in from some dealers also, so that you can manage costs. The upside of two-wheelers is that with shared mobility and mass transport becoming suspicious in terms of carriers of the coronavirus, I think there is a huge opportunity of personal mobility, and specifically at the entry level in case of two-wheelers and even smaller cars. So that is an upside of the virus that is happening. So I think efficiency of operations, minimizing your cost, retaining cash, is the king, infusing more equity, not being debt burdened. I think these are some of the immediate solutions that I can talk of for two-wheeler businesses.
Can I intervene in this?
Please.
You see, you got a wrong impression that I am asking for more inventory. The question raised was that do we need stocks? And I said customer needs stocks, but the stocks have to be reasonable. You know, I always insisted that the dealer should not have more than 28 to 30 days of stock. I mean, that was the norm then. You can change it. So you need a minimum stock. You can't get away from it. And you should not have excess stock. At the end of the day, if a customer comes, can you deliver to him? Because many a times they are very keen to get it. And if you tell him wait for a few days, you may lose, or you may lose the customer satisfaction. So I think a balance has to be maintained.
Okay, great point. Now, I know that we are really running over time here. I just will take a couple of more questions. One of them relates to employee retention and, you know, what percentage salary should I pay? This is a question coming in from, you know, again, several of the audiences, looking at Sukhbir Baga as well as Rajan. Both of them have a similar question. What percentage of salary should we pay? Employee retention is important, but complete April has been a lockdown. We all know that. If lockdown continues, it may still disaster. So what is the view in terms of the team members? How do we retain staff? What percentage of staff do we retain? And how do we go about this? Because clearly, again, manpower cost is again amongst the top 3 cost items for the dealership. I mean, we all understand that.
So can I take this?
Please.
So I think the first thing that you need to look at is in terms of, I can also see a lot of questions in terms of the legality of what we need to pay to the employees during the lockdown period.
Right.
And so one thing is absolutely clear because of the Ministry of Home Affairs notification, which has come under the National Disaster Management Act, which says that you can neither retrench nor deduct salaries per se. So that is the legal position, which means that you will need to retain all your employees, at least for this lockdown period, and you will need to pay 100% salaries. But in spite of this, you've also seen that there have been public announcements of a lot of companies, both non-auto and auto, saying that they're going to deduct salaries, including a statement made by Mr. Rajiv Bajaj about Bajaj Auto, reviewing salary cuts from 15th April onwards. And I think to a response to a lot of queries, what came out was that, yes, deduction will happen, but it will happen with consensus of employees. So I think that's one solution that I would recommend to all dealers. I think employees understand and realize that the dealerships are in a problem. They don't have sufficient cash flow. And I think this is the right time to initiate discussions within your teams and try and develop a consensus on the minimum salary that needs to be disbursed, because I know and I definitely know that it's a huge challenge in terms of even availability of cash to disburse April salary. So it can be deducted, but only with consensus of the employees. The Ministry of Home Affairs guideline is absolutely clear about it.
Okay, great. I think, Sharvik, in my discussion with you earlier, you also talked about restructuring some of the payments for your employees, looking at variable pay packages and other things. Would you like to elaborate on what exactly are you planning to do or are doing at your dealerships?
So again, as Mr. Sanghi said, that yes, we have to look at forming a consensus within the team. So while this consensus is being also made, we are also looking at how we can, reward them in the future when things get better, and we are able to earn that. So, so it is in terms of incentivizing them through profit sharing. So
Right.
working out a structure where they can be, rewarded when things get better, so that they get an opportunity to earn the money what they have agreed to forgo today, tomorrow.
So that is something which you're already doing at your dealerships, right? Yeah, can you hear? Okay, great. Can you, I would just take a couple of, one last question here and then probably conclude this here because I think it's way over time. In terms of looking at, I think there are several questions here which relate to electric mobility. I'm not sure if this is the right panel for that, but broadly, I just wanted to understand from all the panelists here, how do we see India's journey towards, electric vehicles, given this new reality?
I think the way I see it is that one, with the drop of petroleum prices and a huge drop of petroleum prices, and the fact that you will not see them going up again, at least not to the original levels of $60 a barrel. I think the future market and all that I have read and heard about oil markets is that it's never going to cross $40 a barrel. So I see engines will probably become a little more attractive than they were before the kind of crisis that we are talking about. Two, EV as it stands in India today is dependent on a lot of import, and a lot of import from China, whether it is batteries, whether it is motors or drivers. With the kind of focus which is coming into Make in India, and that the fact that the government is a little skeptical about imports from China, I think there will be a temporary setback to the EV movement, because presently whatever EVs are selling in India, a lot of them have a huge component, Chinese component in them. And with a restriction on Chinese imports, I think those things will need to work out. And finally, of course, I think CapEx specifically into R&D, and there's a lot of R&D going on in EV now. There will be limited space for doing that R&D, given the kind of revenue losses which all OEMs have suffered in these 2 months and are going to suffer in future over the next 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, great. Okay, great. So I think we've more or less come to the last part of our presentation, and I think it has been a very interesting discussion. And I think the way both the panelists and some of the questions that have come from the audience clearly point out to the fact that, yes, there is a crisis at hand. Will we crater in front of this crisis, or we will try and use this as an opportunity going forward? Largely depends on, how we look at it. Of course, when you look at a crisis, these are great opportunities to basically look at or reset the risk and reward equations. I mean, I think each one of you knows that when we are running a business, there's a definite inertia, there's a definite momentum with which the business runs. And looking at that, when there is a crisis of this magnitude, it clearly resets the entire risk-reward equation. So there are things that you can, redefine. Looking at the priorities, we talked about several of those. We looked at, in terms of, how we will be going to market. What is it that we are, focusing on? We also talked about our own people. It is, when we look at a crisis, it is a great time to identify leaders and basically, as we say, separate men from the boys. So I think this is, not only from an internal operations perspective, because this crisis is not just something which is limited to the a particular network or a particular country. The outcome of this particular crisis is something which will actually reset the goalpost for every manufacturer. I know Mr. Khattar talked about the fact that 50% and 20%, nearly 70% of market is being cornered by two of the largest players. Would that continue to be a reality, or is that an option? Or is there a reset that could happen? May not be at an all India level, maybe happening in pockets, in specific states, in specific zones, is something which we will have to see. In terms of the opportunity, I think the way going forward, from what we heard from the panelists, is largely, again, look at where your strengths lie. Look at basically, what are you good at? Focus on the customer. And of course, I think we talked about transparency also. I mean, in terms of looking at, how fickle is this customer? What do we need to do? How do we need to adapt to those requirements? The panelists also talked about the fact that we need to be clearly nimble. We need to be asset light. Mr. Khattar again talked about the fact that, look at the business, be as light as possible, and be as fast as possible. And again, I think all the other panelists also talked about looking at costs very, very critically. I think I would just leave it at a couple of points here in terms of going forward. I think basically, if you look at it, it is the level of focus, the commitment, the speed, and our innovativeness, which basically can turn any crisis into an opportunity. When we stare at the world today, it basically, looks like we are staring at a large black, dark room. I mean, there is little or no way forward for us to understand how to navigate going forward the realities that are upon us. Clearly, in terms of looking at the journey forward, it is a step at a time. It is not when we go into a dark room, and that's a question for everybody. And you go into a dark room, it's not that you take big steps suddenly. You will light a candle, you will light a torch to see what's immediately in front of you. Then you would light another candle, and that's when the whole path becomes clear and apparent to everybody on what would be this journey. So it's a point where we need to introspect and take a step at a time, because the darkness is upon everybody. It's not that, I think Mr. Khattar said it very nicely, that, look, I'm also not very sure of how to navigate this, but there are certain thoughts, there are certain time insensitive guidelines that I would like to share. The only last thing that I want to leave the entire audience with is, we did one of our companies did a snap poll over the last 3 days. And this again should give you some good insight in terms of looking at how the opportunity could actually turn for the passenger car market going forward. If you look at a number of respondents who were saying that they will not use a ride hailing or a ride share service at all. This is clearly nearly half the respondents said, 44% roughly said, 45% in fact, said that they would not be using the ride hailing services like a Grab or an Uber or an Ola, at least in the next 6 to 12 months. And also in terms of the second question that we asked them was, has the coronavirus crisis impacted your attitude towards vehicle ownership? And if you really look at it, if you look at the last two ones here, 34% plus 21, over 50% people said, yes, it has strengthened my conviction to own a personal vehicle. So clearly, I think going forward, we need to be driven by the data I think, again, what Mr. Khattar said earlier, past experience is of little or no value. So I think looking at the fact here, we need to clearly, look at our catchment areas, our business in front of us, the customers in front of us, from a very independent data perspective, rather than just be mired with the view that we have always had from the rear view.
What I'm saying is, many times you should know the past, but not necessary to follow the past.
Right.
Based on that experience, see what the future is.
Absolutely.
I personally feel that there is a future of automobile in India, no doubt about it. Absolutely. But in what way it is going to come, and what are people's perception and all. This is Absolutely. A time where the vendors, dealers, and the manufacturers need to sit down together and see what is the road ahead, because each one of them depends on the other.
Right.
When I was there, I never allowed the dealers, at least I did my best, that their inventory should not go beyond these days, because then they become sick. Right. That's a part of our job, to see that they remain healthy. So this thing is that we are in for a major change that is taking place, various things. I think all the three elements need to sit down together and have a way forward.
Thank you very much, all the panelists. Wonderful discussion.